I am going to test 8 different builds of Rosalina to see which one scores the most goals. It's no secret that Rosalina is by far the best striker in the game. She has 17 shooting and 13 technique just on her base stats. And as we already know, shooting and technique are by far the most important factors in whether or not you score a goal. In my video about which one should you max, shooting or technique, there's not a huge difference between either or. If you max shooting, you're going to score a lot of goals, and if you max technique, you're going to score a lot of goals. But there's several different combinations of how you can max out both at the same time. Using the same method as last time, I'm going to test 8 different combinations of shooting and technique to see which one is the most optimal at scoring goals. My baseline from the last video is going to be 19 shooting and 19 technique, which got a total of 26 goals out of 50. So any build that does better than that is the new champion. Starting of course with Rosalina's maximum shooting, 25 and 11. 25 shooting Rosalina actually wasn't that much better than 25 shooting Bowser, scoring 23 out of 50 goals charged from the center circle. I would say the biggest thing holding this build back is the fact that sometimes she just misses the goal completely and hits the post. Having lower technique tends to do this when you're aiming your shots, especially from longer range. So there's a lot of goals that got past Boom Boom that just ended up not going in. On the bright side, almost every single shot was a goalie knockout, so even if you do run this build and you don't get the goal the first try, you might get it on the rebound. I'm going to start with max shooting and work my way down, so the next step is going to be shooting at 23 and technique at 15. This is actually a 4-point jump in technique because of how the stats work, so maybe this is going to be better. But the results were not that great. This build of Rosalina scored a measly 19 out of 50 goals, which is still good, but surprising that it wasn't better than 25 max. I think the biggest problem here is the drop from 25 max shooting to 23, as well as just not having enough technique to get around Boom Boom. Though it is very important for me to bring this up, this was only a 50 shot test for each. There's going to be some variance in how often Boom Boom gets the ball. So unless there's huge differences in the amount of goals scored, I'm not going to put my eggs into one basket saying that this is definitely a worse build. Next step down is going to be 21 shooting and 17 technique. Let's get it started. This is the build that I used to use on Rosalina, so I think it's pretty good. 21-17 spread scored 21 out of 50 goals, so it's not the best, but it was still a pretty high number. Though keep in mind, if you are going full offense on a Rosalina, you might as well get the absolute maximum, and this just isn't it. But based on my test today, I'm definitely going to be switching my setup for Rosalina, and you will see why. Next up is the first build I will be using the Technique Bushido gear. This build is going to give me 20 shooting and 19 technique. So far, we have a new winner. With a whopping 27 goals out of 50, this build's pretty good. I'm kind of mad at myself for not picking up the Technique Bushido armor, but it really makes a huge difference. Because if you use it, you can bring your total of shooting and technique to 39, which is the highest in the game. This is honestly a massive improvement, but it's still not even the best build, so let's keep going. The next build, also with Bushido, is going to be 18 shooting and 21 technique. Honestly, I don't even know what to say about this build, so I'm just going to show you the graph. 31 out of 50 goals scored, 62%. This is honestly unbelievable to me. This is significantly better than the previous winner of 27. And since the difference is 4 goals or more, it's very unlikely that this had something to do with the goalie AI. There may be other variances, and this is still a pretty rough sketch, but this one is by far the best. I still went through to test out the maximum technique of 23, and it didn't work out well. It was a huge drop off. I'm not going to spend much time on it at all because it was so bad. Well, it just dropped back down to 19 out of 50, and it's not that bad, especially compared to other shooters in the game, but now that I know Rosalina's true potential, it's not even worth talking about. Before we get into final thoughts, I want to thank everyone for supporting my channel recently. I'm glad that I have a community that loves Mario Strikers just as much as I do, and I'm going to continue pushing to make more content to keep you guys updated as to what the community is finding. So 1821 Rosalina is the best build, right? Well, there's another test I want to bring to your attention. You see, for every build that I tested today, I also tested cross passes and how likely they are to go in from closer up. This is a very important part of the game, and it needed to be tested because obviously not all of your shots are going to be perfect charges. And even if you get a perfect shot off a lob pass, it's inherently going to be weaker in all areas, which means it's going to move slower and curve less. That being said, is there a difference in these builds based on how often they score from cross passes? And the answer is yes. I won't go into the full details of every single build, but I will say that in general, builds that have higher shooting outperform those with higher technique when it comes to cross passes. The builds with 20 points or higher in shooting scored about half of these shots, while the builds with 20 technique scored half of that. Remember that our top contenders were 2019 and 1821, and 2019 outperformed 1821 when it came to these cross passes. I would love to do more research on this, but honestly, there's just so many variables, so I think the choice between the two is going to come down to personal preference. But wait, I have one more surprise test for you guys. What if you don't want to max out shooting and technique? What if you want to put stuff into other stats like speed or strength? For this type of build, I decided to only put on the Bushido gear. That way, if you want to put it into other stats, you have 3 more gear items that you can attach at will. This gave Rosalina 16 shooting and 17 technique. But is it enough to compete with the other full offense builds? I would say yes. Check this out, we're back to 19 out of 50 goals, which is exactly the same as 23-15 and 14-23. So honestly, Rosalina is just that good. If you would like to sacrifice a little bit of consistency of scoring goals so that you can add speed or strength, then go for it. It all depends on what your personal preference is and what role is needed for your team. So that's all the information I found about Rosalina. If you want my personal opinion, this is going to be my build. The trick helmet on the head, the Bushido bracers on the arms, the trick pad on the body, and the cannon boots on the feet. There was just something about this build that I liked while I was playing it, especially since it got 31 out of 50 goals. I mean, come on, 31 out of 50. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice day.